welcome to another episode of The Grapevine. I'm Susie.
I'm Irene.
I'm Reham.
And this is part 2 of the topic of abortion and the pro-life movement, pro-life ministry. And if you watched last week's episode or the first episode, then you know we're at New Life Solutions, and we're here with the president and CEO, Charles DeMarco. Welcome back. Thank you again for having us.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here.
So, we wanted to ask you about how do you reach out to people who never heard about your ministry or people who are from different faith groups, people who are even Muslims or Hindus or just from different backgrounds and cultures. How do you reach out to those?
Yes, we do a lot of, with all of our ministries, advertising through social media platforms, a lot of word of mouth. We go into a lot of churches of different faith to communicate our message of the sanctity of life. And one of the things, this is one of the things that I really love. In November each year, we have a very large benefit dinner. And that's where we have a speaker come in. We had Lee Strobel last year, and he came in and talked about the case for life. And it was wonderful. And one of the things that just thrills my heart is I look across, we have two of them, one in Tampa, there's usually about 500 people there, one in the Coliseum in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is about 900 people. And as I look across these rooms, I see people and attendees of all different backgrounds, all different faiths, but here's what, they're coming together because they are passionately pro-life. And I love to see the unity and the collaboration. I'm all about unity and collaboration, especially in the pro-life area. And I always think of, it just comes to my mind all the time, whenever I think about unity, I think about in Scripture, about the full armor of God. And I think about the shield, you know, and I think about how, in context, a Roman soldier shield was about 3 to 5 feet tall, not the little round pirate shields we sometimes think about. And one of their defensive strategies was to get together, and this would be a giant wall of shields, and they were usually soaking wet, made of leather, to put out the fiery dart of the arrow. And when I see all of us from different backgrounds, different faiths, but coming together for the pro-life movement, I'm very thankful for that. So we do try to reach out to where there is that common ground, especially from a pro-life side.
That's very thrilling.
Do you have a lot of rejection from non-Christian people?
You know, this is a very polarizing topic. So, you know, we run into, I'll call it that spiritual warfare every single day doing what we do because it's polarizing. And I think about what's in the news today and what we've seen New York do recently, earlier this year, what we're seeing Vermont do, what we saw just a few weeks ago, the law that would have provided protection for a baby that survived a botched abortion not get affirmed. The New York law where you could essentially have an abortion up to term. I mean, this is what we are dealing with. You have groups like Planned Parenthood that receive, last year, in 2018, $565 million a year. That's what they received last year to help do what they do. Whereas organizations like ours receive zero. And so that's what we're against. The media, the government is very much against this. As a matter of fact, I mean, just a few weeks ago, I was in Tallahassee, and there was a bill being surfaced that day that is still making its way. So this impacts everyone in Florida. So regardless of where you live, this is important for you in Florida. And it's still going through the process right now. And this bill would mandate that a parent, at least one parent, would provide consent before their minor child has an abortion. Right now, that doesn't exist.
Right.
However, if your minor child needs an aspirin at school, you need consent.
You need consent.
Yeah. If you get an ear piercing,
wants her ear pierced, you need consent.
Right.
But for something as serious as an abortion, you
That's
don't need
insane.
consent.
That is, I mean, that's beyond.
I read about
beyond
that.
me.
I think some law happened. I don't know if it was the
understand
80s or 90s, and it kind of gave them where they didn't need consent, or it was some kind of privacy thing. I don't remember, but I know they were saying if you were really wanted to make sure that this law passed, please write a letter to this congressperson and to this senator so that they know. And that was, I believe, it was last week.
Yes,
I'm not sure
it was. It would be.
yeah.
Last week.
It was last Monday and Tuesday they were
yes,
meeting.
That is correct.
Yeah.
It's still going through. And so when we were meeting with these lawmakers, and we met with those that are pro-life, but also pro-choice, and we would sit down and talk with them, we would say, look, I know where you stand on the issue of abortion. You know where we stand. We're almost not even talking about that right now, but can we at least agree that if a minor child is moving forward with this, at least one parent has to be aware and sign off with something as serious medically, physically, emotionally, and spiritually as an abortion. So we're dealing with a lot of headwind. It's like a vehicle in your car and you're driving in a headwind. Ministries such as ours deal with that spiritual warfare headwind every day from the world's perspective.
So Charles, how far are we along now with that law? Or, I mean, I know you said it's kind of spreading throughout Florida. Do you know where it is right now?
Well, a few weeks ago, it passed the first round. When I say passed, not law yet, but it has to go through multiple cycles of passing. And it passed that first round. It's still being circulated. It's very, you would think it would not be controversial, but it's very contentious. I think even in the first round, someone was removed from the proceedings because it was getting very volatile. But it's still working its way through the system of the state of Florida.
Do you know if the other states are?
Many of them do.
Many of them do. Great.
Many of them do have that in place.
Have a law that would require consent from a parent. Okay.
Correct.
Do you know what the fear is on the I'm sorry to cut you off. Do you know what the fear is on the pro-choice movement on this law passing? Is it that it's interfering with the bottom dollar, or is it they're worried about maybe the child's life from what their parent would do to them if they found out their child's pregnant? Do you know what exactly their fear is about having a parent give consent? Or what they're arguing towards, or what they're...
Yeah, like what is their point?
Yeah. I think this topic, when you start to get into the space of other approvals or check marks off of a list, or you're starting to maybe from their perspective think like, well, if someone wants to do this, they can do this. They might be thinking if we start putting in some protocols to prevent, maybe that's the springboard to the higher when non-minor activity. I really don't know exactly how they're processing that.
Right.
This would seem, honestly, common sense to me.
It is.
If we're doing it for aspirin, consent that is, if we're having parental consent for ears being pierced, if we're doing parental consent for a field trip off-site, how can we not have parental consent for a serious medical procedure, let alone the emotional impact?
I mean, I don't know if I'm too far off, but in my opinion, even when a woman chooses to have an abortion, I think the father of the child also should have a say.
Right.
I mean, call me
right.
too I don't know, but it's just logic because this is also his own flesh and blood.
Right.
Yes.
But I think that's in
and I'm
50
sure
years
that's
from now, maybe.
I'm sure that's what you're thinking, that if that's the protocol that they need permission, then eventually maybe it'll expand. We'll
but
need
right
the father's
now,
permission
the father
or
has
something
no
as
say
well.
whatsoever.
I know.
That's correct. You know, Raham, you bring up such a great point, because the fathers do need to be more actively involved. And ministries like ours, pregnancy centers throughout the U.S., it would be such a value to reach out to the fathers. Picture this. We're talking about sanctity of life. You could almost, if you want to go to the root, you can talk about sanctity of marriage and sanctity of family, and how sanctity of life is an offshoot of the dilution of the sanctity of marriage and the sanctity of family. Here's what I mean. 86% of women that have an abortion are unmarried.
Yes.
The number one most influential factor to keep their child or to have an abortion, the father of the child. So why wouldn't pregnancy centers reach out to the father? A lot of times that doesn't happen. You know, I look at the account in Scripture, and it's referred to as the adulterous woman, but it's a wonderful picture of Jesus' forgiveness, if you will. And a lot of times when you read that account, a lot of times people say, where's the guy in this picture? Because he needs to be stoned too, right? Where is he?
I have heard sermons about this a lot.
Okay.
Many times.
So like, where's the guy? He needs to be stoned.
wasn't
Or
dragged out.
we want to rescue her and still stone. But here's the bigger question for us as Christians, and especially in the pregnancy center space. Where is the guy? Because he is missing out on the grace and forgiveness that she just received.
That's so true.
He's not in the picture, and she was just displayed this amazing grace, this amazing forgiveness, and he's not even there. He missed out. He needs that. You know, it's like this. Picture
It
this.
goes both
I
ways.
never
I
thought
see what
about
you're
that.
saying. I see what you're saying. It does go both ways.
There is, it's almost like this, and I've heard it put like, if we were neighbors and I were to say, hey, I'm going to mow my yard today. What do you think about that? And you'd be like, okay, do whatever you want to do.
Enjoy.
And it's like this with
Not
a woman and the father, the mother and the father. When she says to him that I'm pregnant, she's not asking for approval for anything. She's going to do whatever she wants to do. But there is a period of time, seconds probably, she's looking for any kind of affirmation. That's why if the father of the child affirms and supports,
Baby
they
saved.
choose life.
Yeah.
And usually that doesn't happen. And this is what we see. He is by far the most influential person to make a decision. We have 86% unmarried. We see a breakdown of marriage and family. Now the sanctity of life is being so.
Yeah.
Aren't there a lot of men that are pushing them, though, to have that abortion?
We see that a lot. You know, when we talk to our clients and here are the things that we know will be challenging. When we ask about, do you have a support group? Is the father of the child supportive? And if it's no. Have you had a previous abortion? Yes. That is very abortion determined, if you will, like on that path, and it's going to take a lot. Now, if the answers are, do you go to church? We ask them that question as well to see if there's some community there as well, and faith. If the answers are no, I don't have a support group. No, the father is not supportive. No, I don't go to church. Yes, I've had an abortion. It's very challenging. But conversely, if yes, I do have a support group. Yes, I do go to church. I haven't had an abortion in my past. We see very favorable outcomes with that. So that's why we really try to encourage, the whole group in decision-making process, and then also with the father and the support group. And how we do that, too, it's, we have to, when someone comes in and says, okay, I'm in an unplanned pregnancy, what do I do? We have to share all options with them. So we do share abortion. That's an option. We have to share that. Right. And we walk through what abortion is about and the implications and ramifications.
Right.
We also talk about adoption. And then we talk about choosing life with parenting as an option as well. And even if we don't get to the point where we can have a sonogram, where 9 of 10 women will choose life, on our iPad, when we find out the due date, we pull up a live video so they can see in the womb what their child looks like. To add that kind of granularity and detail that, there is a heartbeat, there is a formation. Because when you're dealing with an unplanned pregnancy between ages of 17 and 23, now I know this is going to sound maybe potentially like, oh yes, of course, for us and potentially your viewers, but many of them don't recognize that it's anything more than just a blob of tissue.
Yeah.
But it's a human life. At conception, there's unique DNA formed. In just a handful of weeks, you've got all sorts of connections and development and heartbeat, and when they see that.
That's amazing.
Can I just say something? I know I'm going to take you on a sidetrack, but I want to bring this topic a little bit back to home, to our Coptic Orthodox community and church and faith and culture. I have had an experience with women that I know in my life, friends, family, relatives, who became pregnant in an unplanned situation. Devastating sometimes. They're completely not prepared for it. Maybe what you're saying doesn't really apply, because most of these women, all of them, are married and in an established marriage. they're not thinking about divorce or anything, but yet they're not ready for a child. But maybe they have 2 or 3 other children, and they feel
Very
that they
close in age.
cannot support them anymore. Maybe health-wise, they cannot have another child. A lot of different circumstances. So maybe what you're saying about the single mom or the teenage who the father is not going to be supported, that really doesn't apply much to our culture. And in my opinion, like when I think, I put myself in their situation, I know it's a very tough decision. Even though you are married and established and you live with your husband and everything,
you go to church.
still, and go to church and have all the support, still, you know that the fact that you are pregnant with another child is a life-changing event. Life will never be the same after that particular child. What do you say to these women? How do you see these women in your ministry, or what do you say?
Before you respond,
them?
I actually want to add to that. In our culture, a lot of the times the children are just maybe 11 months apart, 14 months apart. They're very close in age. So when a third pregnancy comes, it becomes so hard for them because it's like they're all in diapers at once. It's almost like not having triplets, but it's just so close in age. So they feel like they are in despair. And so I understand what you're saying because I have seen it. I was 11 months apart from my brother.
From my experience, the 2 women in my life that I know that seriously considered abortion, which is in our culture, is like a no at all. But they under the pressure of life and their situations and the money issues, they were like, what do I do? I mean, you know, I don't blame them. I feel like we are all weak. We're all, you know.
How do we help them?
Yeah.
What can we say to them?
That's a great question, because we do see that as well. You see the full spectrum of life and backgrounds and situations. And it's one of the things where here's what I've noticed. I've never heard anyone say, "I'm glad I had an abortion." I've heard many say,
that's a very good point. That answers right there.
It's very, very true.
That answers there.
It's, you know, I think of the gift of conception. I think of how even in Ruth we even see that word. How wonderful is that? The word conception is all throughout Scripture, and I think of how Ruth in the book of Ruth was given the gift of conception, and I know, and not to validate their feelings, because those are real. People feel that way. And that's why we try to come alongside from a counseling perspective and from discipleship type to help process that. And because like we were saying, you know, I've never heard anyone say that, you know, I'm so glad I had my abortion, but I hear the converse all the time.
Yes,
and you will never regret choosing life, even in a very difficult circumstance.
That's a very strong point. Yes. Very strong point.
And to comment on what Reham said too, like back home, yes, it will be the burden of another child, the financial situation. But for someone that health-wise, let's say a mother with the health-wise, and she has to get rid of this baby or she will die.
Or something is wrong with the baby too. Like there is a strong suspicion of some sort of a congenital anomaly or something.
Well, that's what's going on in parts of Europe, that they're saying, well, you can find out if they have Down syndrome and so you can abort them. But I mean, that's still life. They're still valuable, and they're our brothers and sisters. And I think whether they have, I mean, recently, I think it was in England, I don't know if it was 6 months ago or something, there was a family that was trying to come to America so that they can bring their son, who has a hopeless case that he's supposed to die, but there was a doctor in America that was willing to see him, and then they thought maybe there would be a chance, but England wouldn't let him come, and he ended up dying. I think his name was Charlie, I forgot the name, but the fact that these people are fighting, and it's considered a lost cause. And they're fighting so hard, and I mean, if their son survives, he would be basically like an invalid or just dependent on them forever, and yet they were fighting with every cent that they had and going through the courts or whatever it is just to bring him to America so that he would have a small chance even to live a very difficult life where he might not even be, you know, able to do anything.
I always think of the quote by a former president, Ronald Reagan, where he said, "I've noticed everyone that is for abortion has already been born." And then he followed that up with, "We have the duty to protect the life of an unborn child." And to your question, Irene, to your statement, because that has been around for a long time. What we hear that a lot from the enemy, and sometimes I think he hijacks terms, words, philosophies, and different principles. And you go back 30, 40 years, and you might have different statistics with a statement of the life of the mother, okay? Because of the advances in technology and in medicine and in the incidence of cesarean rates, that is so rare because of a cesarean. And so we don't see that a lot in that particular situation. And just because of the advances and how they can just do a cesarean at times.
Or take care of the high-risk
That's correct.
mom or high-risk pregnancy.
It's what comes to my mind if the doctor just put the fear in the mom's head, and convincing her to abort this child, and then the guilt that she's going to carry and live with, and that comes to you have women from young women to different type of it coming in with devastated about their pregnancy. How do you start counseling them? Where to start? Because every case it's different. So what is the process of counseling? Do you counsel? Tell us about it.
Sure, yeah. When we first, meet someone who now is facing an unplanned pregnancy, we'll start asking a whole host of questions, some of which we're talking about, just about if there's a support group, if they attend church, if there's any kind of communities or small groups that they're involved with. We do have counselors, certified counselors as well, to help process and dialogue. Sometimes we want to find out the root. Is it materials or resources? Like, for example, in our centers, we offer these discipleship classes, or even life skills classes about just what is life like with a child? How do you take care of X, Y, and Z? How-to type classes. And as they come, they earn credits, if you will, and those credits can be used in our boutiques for clothing and for food and for toys. Whatever their need is, we really want to come alongside and help equip. So there's a lot of dialogue about what is, the fear, how can we help, how can we connect you with other groups. That's why I love, a lot of churches do the MOPS group, which is wonderful, the mothers of preschooler groups, just to be a like-minded community. We try to connect like-minded communities and to reassure. And so we really want to come alongside, and we don't want an external factor or a anticipated maybe fear that sometimes doesn't even materialize be such a heavy variable in choosing life or death for their child.
Right.
Do you provide in-home counseling service in case of the mom can't come? She doesn't have a car. She for any circumstances, would you be able to do?
That's a good question.
We don't travel to the homes. They usually come into the office at one of our 4 centers. Would you be able
to give them a ride if they don't have a ride to the center?
You know what? That's never happened before, but we would make sure we connect. Whether we get a cab for them to go back, we will do whatever it takes to definitely reach out and help them.
Because I think
that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, if they're not, they're most likely they wouldn't abort if they couldn't even get to the abortion clinic, right?
True.
It depends.
I mean, unless they're doing something at home.
No, it depends on the support they have.
Yeah.
And it depends on if everybody at home on the same page. Sometimes the pregnant woman herself doesn't want to have an abortion, but her mom is telling her, I am not going to help you with this child. If you choose to keep him or her, you're on your own. And the father of the child is saying the same thing. So she is like helpless.
No money, no right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. That's a good question.
Yeah. And again, you see that a lot. We would do whatever we could to make sure we can minister and reach out to people. Absolutely.
Great.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So do you receive any calls from women that think you're an abortion clinic? And how do you convince them to come in and meet with you if they realize you're not? Or do you not tell them, no, we're not an abortion clinic? Or do you tell them, just come in, we'll talk about an abortion?
Oh, yes. No. Every now and then that might happen because of search words and key terms, and they might call. But we're very transparent with who they're calling. Okay. And at the same time, though, we do say there is another option. there is another choice. There is a choice outside of the choice you might be thinking. So we do invite them in. And we do see a high incidence. And we're very transparent about who we are and what we do. And that we're a faith-based group as well. But we can provide all these services to help encourage to choose life for their child. So that does happen from time to time. But we let them know who they've called and that there is. You know, I think sometimes that the enemy has hijacked words. And choice is one of them.
Right.
Because there is a choice. There's a choice for life.
So in the previous episode, we talked a little bit about how you approach or you do not approach women who are entering an abortion clinic or Planned Parenthood clinic. And you also mentioned something about you go into USF or setting up a booth or a table or something like that. Do you feel that you're treated equally as Planned Parenthood? Do they give you the same accommodation, the same consideration, or tell us about that?
Yeah, no, they do, absolutely. Yes, we don't set anything up in front of abortion clinics or anything like that. And but at the campus of USF, we set up, you know, they have the row too, where they have all the different organizations from different faith backgrounds as well. They have opportunities for them to set up their kind of booth in their breezeway and in different areas, and we set that up. We have able to do some testing too within one of the facilities at USF, as well as we had one of our passages, small groups at a USF as well. And so they are very welcoming.
That's good.
With
That is really good to hear.
Yeah. I mean, we want to do more and more to spread the word and create awareness, and so more people are aware.
I think you're doing a good job. I mean, we found you.
Yeah, well, here we go.
And we reached out to you, and we got a great answer. So,
you're very responsive.
you're working.
Thank you for that.
We're seeing the ministry, which is great. We're experiencing it. Not that we're pregnant, but we're experiencing the benefit of it.
You know, I often think that, you know, this comes up a lot too, and I just think we're just a handful of months away from Christmas. It was just, you know, 4 months ago, and I think about how Jesus was born as a baby, and I think about how the first person to recognize him, outside of Mary and Joseph being told, right, by an angel, was an unborn child when John the Baptist slept in Elizabeth's womb.
Yes.
And I think, what a picture, a beautiful picture of painting of the sanctity of life and the value of an unborn child. The king would come as a child, but the first person to recognize him was an unborn child himself.
I never thought about that.
Gave me some tingles.
It's very thoughtful. Yes.
Well, we've got one more episode with Charles DeMarco from New Life Solutions, and please join us again next week so we can ask him some more questions and you'll get to be more educated. Thank you, and join us again next week.
See you soon.
See you next week.